Hey everyone, welcome back to the latest episode of the Unlocking Doors podcast. I'm here with Michelle Castle. Today we are talking about an interest rate buy down and how that is helping buyers and sellers in this market. So, Michelle, let's jump right into it.
Let's do it.
What is an interest rate buy down?
So literally just what it says. The buyer, the seller, builder has the option of buying down the interest rate on the loan.
Okay.
There's a couple different ways to do it.
Yeah, let's talk about, so how does that work? Is it just the buyer says, I want to buy it down and they give the money and fork it over, or is it, where does the money come from?
So let's just back up even further than that.
Okay.
Why are we even having this conversation?
Yeah.
Rates went up,
yeah.
and people have said, you know what, I don't want to buy a house because I don't like the interest rates. But then they look around, they go, I'm seeing some good deals on some of these houses.
Yeah.
But I still don't like the interest rate.
Right.
So that's where this conversation, I think, came up. About a year and a half ago, we started talking about this a lot, because I remember when I got in the business a long time ago, you'd hear the word buy down, but we really hadn't been in a market where it was a big deal.
Right.
So, literally, I had to get old spreadsheets out and start looking, how did we even calculate buy downs?
Right.
So, it's literally buying down the interest rate.
Yeah.
And you can do that as a permanent or a temporary. Temporary's been the most popular right now.
Right. Because it's such a drastic difference in the payment. So essentially, whenever we're negotiating these offers for our buyers, the seller's they've got a certain net that they've got to hit, or else it doesn't make sense for them to sell.
Right.
The buyer has a certain budget that they want to stay within, or else they're going to move on to the next one,
right,
where a seller is going to work with them. And so there's this almost kind of stalemate, and these rate buy downs, at least what I've seen in actual negotiations, are what is keeping buyers and sellers transacting right now. It's a big part of it, at least. And
I think it's kind of, if you have a conversation with the seller in years past, whenever you'd say, hey, seller, will you come up with X number of dollars out of your net proceeds and cover the closing cost?
yes,
That was a pretty sore subject.
yeah,
But I think sellers can see it from the buyer's point of view now, because a lot of these sellers have 3% and 4% interest rates on their loan. And they are looking at it going, well, I've got to buy a house too. And I don't like the interest rates.
right,
Even though you and I know that there's still good interest rates, perception is reality in a lot of cases. And the perception is the rates are high.
yeah,
And so I think it's a lot easier conversation than asking a seller to pay closing cost.
yeah, exactly. And so essentially, what we're seeing is, we will negotiate, is it 1, 2, 3 points off of the loan, 3% off of the loan or off of the purchase
Interest rate.
price that the that the seller is going to pay towards the buyer's rate buy down. And so usually the seller or the builder, like you mentioned, is going to be the one that's paying that rate buy down. And I think really, and we've got some numbers printed off here, I think that's really where we can kind of talk more specifics on how big of a deal this is. Because like I said, I've had several transactions recently where it's just the seller's like, no, I'm not, I can't reduce my sales price enough to get to where the buyer wants it to be with their monthly payment. And the buyer's like, well, I would go up to your price, but the payment is just not working for me. So let's go through this scenario on a $400,000 purchase. And just kind of walk them through what the savings are, what the cost of the seller would be. And of course, this varies for every scenario, but this is just a generic $400,000 purchase.
Plain Jane conventional loan.
Yeah. 20% down. So walk us through this.
So, if you were doing, and just for simplicity, we'll just do 20%, like you said, conventional loan, nothing fancy. Right now, according to just the posted rate on Mortgage Daily, you'd be looking at, in this scenario, we did 6.89 because that's what it was at the posted time. So if you were just doing a plain Jane conventional loan, 30-year fixed with no buy down, you'd be looking at a payment of $2,100, $2,105, right? So and then you add your taxes and insurance in there, and it's a payment that's going to be closer to $3,000 in Texas.
Right.
So with a buy down, you literally have the ability on a temporary buy down for the interest rate to be reduced as much as 3% off of that 6.89.
Which is drastic.
That's a huge difference.
Yeah.
I mean, that would take your payments from 2105 to 1507.
Yeah.
That's
now,
a big difference.
And I do think we do need to clarify that is, so this is a 3-2-1 buy down, meaning in the first year, you're getting a full 3% reduction in the interest rate. The second year, it's a 2% reduction in the interest rate. And then the third year is a 1%. And then it goes up to the market rate.
Note rate for the rest of the note.
Yeah. So it's not, you're not saving that $597 throughout the life of the loan with this rate buy down, but it does get you in a position where in that first year, it's drastically lower. Second year is still drastically lower. And it helps with budgeting. It helps with just being able to make that happen. And then maybe if the rates do drop and it makes sense to refinance, that's where you're having those conversations with your clients.
Well, and a lot of lenders are allowing, whenever you do go to do the refinance, you're not going to pay the lender fees again. You're still going to have some closing costs. And you do see some misleading ads where it's like, we're not going to charge you for any closing cost. Well, what they mean is they're not going to charge you their closing costs, but you're still going to be fees associated. So be real careful about that, listeners, whenever you are looking at those ads. Some of them are just misleading in that area. Mm-hmm. The other thing that is really cool about these temporary buy downs is just think about the different scenarios where this would be beneficial. I think about someone who has just recently completed nursing school, and they just are, they're going to work with just minimum pay, but as they continue to work, they'll pick up, their income's going to increase.
Right.
So, but as a lender, it is our responsibility that we do prove that you have the ability to pay. And so we're going to still qualify everybody on that highest payment amount.
Right.
So we're not putting people into homes where the payment is $600 less than what the actual payment is without knowing that they could afford that payment with the full increase of that note rate.
Yeah. And I'm glad you kind of steered the conversation that way, because there's a couple of hesitations I have with the permanent buy down, or
temporary buy down.
Temporary buy downs. And that is, whenever you buy a property today, the assessed taxes and insurance are going to be lower than what they're going to be next year.
Right.
Because
you hope.
Yeah. And so with this temporary buy down, you have a couple of factors working against you whenever the next year comes. So number one, your interest rate does jump up a point. Number two, your taxes could potentially jump up quite a bit. Number three, and everybody in this North Texas area is feeling this, insurance premiums are jumping up pretty significantly. So, I mean, if you're going to do this, I think you also need to have some foresight into the fact that it's not just that interest rate that's going to jump up. You need to make sure that you're also budgeting for those taxes and insurance adjustments. And it's hard to guess where that's going to be. Right. But just be expecting it. And that's one thing. I've seen some lenders and realtors talking about these temporary buy downs. And that's always been my biggest hesitation is that you also have to factor that stuff in. So,
I mean, truly, and you and I are in business to stay in business.
Right.
And so, I mean, that part is really important. And one reason this is going a totally new direction, but I think that it's really important that you choose to work with someone who is somebody you're going to see in your community, is someone that's going to be staying in touch with you, because, I mean, you could do business with somebody else and may even save money doing business somewhere else. But are they looking out for your best interest, not just for how do I get you into the home the cheapest way today, but how can I help keep you in that home and help you build wealth in that home?
Yeah.
I think that part's really important.
Yeah. And so there's also, there's these temporary buy down solutions. There's also a permanent buy down solution, which whenever we bought our house, that's what we went with, was a permanent buy down. Just it made more sense for our specific scenario. And one thing you were talking about before the show started was there are some instances like with credit where you may not want to do a temporary buy down. Talk a little bit about that.
God, there's a lot of scenarios. So with the temporary buy down, the the whole thought around that is, get into the home. You heard that stupid
Date the
phrase,
rate.
date the rate, marry the house,
Yeah.
whatever.
Everybody
That's
loves
so
that.
dumb. And so it's so dumb. But I mean, I get the point.
Yeah.
Yes, you're the interest rate is not permanent. The
Mhm.
price that you pay for the house is. The location of the house is.
Right.
The condition of the house is not. I mean, like, you think about the things that you can control and what you can't control. But so interest rates they're gonna change over time.
Mhm.
And so the thought is you get in the house, you go ahead and do a temporary buy down. It's a payment you can afford. It's a lower payment for the next, 1, 2, 3 years, however many years you buy down the rate.
Right.
And then you just refinance. My concern is, will you want to refinance because you are going through a whole loan process again?
Mhm.
And you're still going to have closing costs. Even if you don't have lender costs, there's still cost associated with it. And you're going to add that to the balance.
Right.
So yes, you're going to refinance to lower the rate, but you're going to add money to the balance. So really, does that make sense?
Mhm.
And then will you even qualify? I mean,
Yeah.
what if you right now, Cory, go, you know what, this field that I'm in right now, I'm going to just change careers in the next year or two.
Mhm.
Well, you wouldn't want to do a temporary buy down if that's the case,
Yeah.
depending on what kind of field you're going to go into. So the other times that I think about is whenever you just marginally qualified for the house. Don't do a temporary buy down unless you know for sure that you have all of the disciplines in place that you're going to qualify for the house for the refinance without any problems.
Right.
So, I mean, you just have to think about, so many times people aren't looking at they're looking at the now and they're not looking at 3, 5, 10 years down the road and thinking, how old will I be? How old will my children be if you have children? What kind of situation am I going to be? Am I in even a long-term career? Like all of these things, what does my health look like?
Right.
All of those things matter.
Yeah. I had a scenario where I had a buyer who worked with Guild. It was actually one of Sabrina's past clients. So,
Whoop, whoop.
But anyways, where this temporary buy down made sense for them was they qualified for the home that they have now and the home that they wanted to buy. And doing this scenario, they were able to, I don't know the specifics of the behind the scenes, but it really helped with get them in the new home with a manageable payment for now. And then they're going to, their plan is to do some work, fix up the house, sell it. And they're going to be able to increase their net whenever they do the repairs that people are going to want to see in this market and sell it, put more money in their pocket. And then they're either going to refinance, recast, whatever that may be. But I know they spent all of their time with the mortgage coach calculator talking about the best scenario, just like you do with your clients. And, that's another scenario where I could see that being beneficial is
it's almost like the bridge.
It's almost like a bridge, but it's not, it's, they're carrying both loans and it just makes it more affordable right now.
Well, and you and I, we did the math before the show too. Instead of a temporary buy down, they could have gotten the seller to agree to a lower sales price.
Yeah.
That wouldn't have benefited them in that case. And they could have used that same money to cover closing costs and cover a permanent buy down. They wouldn't have saved the same amount of money.
Right.
So I was even doing the math, like if the seller agreed to sell the house for the same amount of money for the 3-year buy down, which was about $15,000.
Right.
If the seller agreed to reduce the sales price by $15,000, it'd save you $79 a month.
Yeah.
So to your point in the beginning of the show, a lot of times the buyer and the seller are negotiating sales price because the buyer's trying to get to a certain monthly payment. Well, you spread that over 30 years, you'd have to reduce the sales price a lot sometimes to get to that budget payment.
Right.
Whereas a temporary buy down allows them to do that. If you were to spend just a little bit of money, say in this case, you spent like you just did one discount point, $3,200, you'd save about $80, $85 a month.
Yeah.
So again, over time, that still might be better to get a little bit more money, do a permanent buy down, save it over the entire time and not have to worry about a refinance.
Right.
Versus, I know this can get confusing as we're talking about numbers, especially if you're just listening and you're not, watching and you're not seeing numbers.
I'll throw some infographics up so that they can kind of follow along.
So they can see. But the point is, these are all conversations you should have. You shouldn't be in a hurry, and you should ask all of the questions and look at options. It can get confusing sometimes to look at all of these scenarios. So you really need to, that's why we like Mortgage Coach, because, we can put it out there in a way that it is, you can just see column to column of the different scenarios. So,
yeah. And one thing I see that, this kind of goes back to who you work with matters in this industry, both in the real estate side and the mortgage side. One thing I've seen so much with these higher interest rates is buyer submits their offer, seller says no way, and then it's just
a done deal.
We're going somewhere else, and then maybe the buyer gets out of the market. The seller's listing sits there forever, and so working with somebody who has the experience or just the thought process of, okay, this doesn't work. What can we change? What can we negotiate to where it works for the seller? They can go on about their lives. It works for my buyer. I can get them the payment they need. We can make this work for everybody so that it's a win-win. And so that's where I've really seen, there's agents that really struggled in this high interest rate environment, and loan officers too. Agents and loan officers that struggled. And then there's the ones that are constantly getting deals closed for their clients. And that's the biggest differentiator is that they are looking at the big picture. They're not looking at it, from a
win or lose.
Yeah. Win or lose. It's a, how do we
all win?
Yeah. How do we all win? How do we make this transaction happen so that everybody comes out where they need to be?
Absolutely. So. I see this over and over because it's not even negotiation, it's conflict resolution, right? Because from it's marriage counseling, it's conflict resolution, it's all of the above.
Yeah.
But a seller put their house on the market. They got it ready to sell.
Yeah.
A buyer went out and looked at houses. They found one they like. Like, how can we not figure out how to make something work if they're close within range? It just, you're right.
Ego gets in the way sometimes too.
Maybe so, but there is a big difference in working with someone who knows how to work through that versus, well, forget it. Yeah. That seller's just being a jerk.
Yeah, exactly.
Or that buyer's just being ridiculous.
Yeah.
Okay, we could talk about that all day long.
Yeah, that's I'm not going to throw any names out in that episode either. Anyways, guys, thanks for checking out this episode of the Unlocking Doors podcast, where we talked about rate buy downs and how that's helping our sellers and buyers win in this market. If you're thinking about buying or selling, be sure and reach out to Michelle about financing, reach out to me about that home search or getting your home sold. Share this with a friend, give us a thumbs up, and be sure and subscribe to the channel. We'll catch you on the next episode.